Amen.
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 As I look at the various screens, I see lots of familiar faces, so it is very, very good to see you all this morning and to be part of your celebrating your anniversary. When students are learning about preaching, they're told to hold the Bible in one hand and the newspaper, at least they used to be told to hold the newspaper. I think now they're told to hold the cell phone in the other hand, the smartphone. To hold the scriptures and the story of Christ and the Gospels, and on the other side to hold our current life and our situation. Well, if you opened up your smartphone or your iPad or your computer these days, you would be hearing and seeing a cacophony of voices from around the world yelling into your ear about which way to go, particularly in relationship to the COVID-19 virus pandemic. We hear voices yelling, open up the economy, get it going again. I don't care how many old people die, I just want the economy to keep going. And we hear others who say, keep everything closed, shut the borders, don't let anybody in because we have to protect ourselves. And we hear some who were saying, well, we have to hold a balance, and so the car washes and the landscaping companies can open up. Behind every one of those voices are different values, different expectations, and different voices that they are listening to. This morning, when we opened up the scriptures, we heard Jesus speaking to the disciples and Pharisees. But we need to remember where this comes in the Gospel of John. It comes right after the story about the healing of the blind man, the man born blind, who had himself been surrounded by voices. The voice of Jesus saying, go and wash, and he found his sight. The voice of neighbors who could not believe that this was the man that they knew. The voice of the Pharisees who said this couldn't possibly be true because no sinner, and of course Jesus must have been a sinner, no sinner could possibly heal. We hear the voice of the blind man's parents who are extremely cautious and say, we don't want to say anything, just go and talk to him. And finally, the voice of the Pharisees kicking the man out of the synagogue, out of the company of people because they could not stand what he represented. And lastly, Jesus' voice again saying, so what do you believe? Which voice will you follow? And the man says, sir, I believe in you. And Jesus follows that immediately with today's gospel about the Good Shepherd, about the fact that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd who will take them to green pasture. They won't follow the stranger or the one who will not take them to what they know will be good. Jesus says the Good Shepherd will take you to green pasture, will take you to abundant life. Well, all around us we have other voices asking for our attention and our commitment, and each of those voices has its own set of values. We have said that we will follow the voice of Christ, the voice of the Good Shepherd, the one who would leave the 99 to go and search for the one that was lost. The one who tells the story of the Good Samaritan and what it is to love neighbor as self. The one who reminded us that the greatest commandments are to love God with heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love neighbor. Jesus constantly brings us back to the reality that to follow Jesus is to say something about how we live every day, no matter what other voices are shouting in our ears. Now, it doesn't mean we ignore good and voices that it will give life. We do have to listen to the voices of the medical community and the scientific community that are helping us to understand this virus. But we also have to remember that the first voice is Jesus's voice, and that voice should also be calling us to look around and say, what is missing in the voices we're hearing? I love the fact that Psalm 23 is part of today, the most beloved of the Psalms, because it takes us into that place where the Good Shepherd leads us into green pasture beside still waters. But it also says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't say if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't promise that we will not walk through that valley. It says, though I walk. For we all walk in the valley of the shadow of death every day. And of course, it's much closer to us in the middle of this pandemic. But the response to that is, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. We have the knowledge of the resurrected Christ, that not even death itself is stronger than that love for us. And so we can go into this time of pandemic, into that valley of death or illness that is possible. None of us is completely exempt from the possibility that we might contract it. But in the midst of that, we have the Good Shepherd who walks with us to guide us and to ask how we will live in the midst of what everybody else is fearing. How will we live without fear? And how will we live in a way that reflects the values of the Good Shepherd, which is about loving neighbor as self? What does it mean to love neighbor in this time? Well, it certainly has meant physical distancing. It's meant protecting the vulnerable. It's meant rethinking how we value people like grocery store workers, farmers, truckers, hospital cleaners, personal support workers, those who care for the elderly, and those who protect the most vulnerable. We have learned that we don't value them particularly well, and that there are gaps in our systems, and that other values have precluded the care that should be given in our nursing homes and retirement homes. Jesus promises abundant life for those who walk with them. For some of the voices that are screaming in our ears, the abundant life for them, or for many, is described only by wealth, by the value of keeping an economy going no matter what it does to the weakest and most vulnerable around us. For others, we have seen the voices reminding us that what's most important are family, friends, community, and learning to see those who have been left out in the middle of this pandemic. For followers of Jesus, listening for the voice of the Good Shepherd calls us to new ways to provide what is needed for the most vulnerable, whether that's caring for your neighbor in doing their shopping, providing food or shelter, being willing, if you are a healthcare worker, to make sacrifice to go into work, to put your own life on the line for the sake of others. Maybe it means phone calls to those who are shut in this isolated time. Maybe it means something like a birthday drive-by, where you can wave and smile and share a moment of connection. These times are asking us to go deep into what we value most. And which voice will we listen to? And we're called first and foremost to listen to the voice of Jesus Christ, And then to ask, how do those other voices, how are they informed by what Jesus has called us to do and be? And it is to put that first, no matter what. I know that that has been the call of those who have lived and served and worshiped at Holy Trinity in Thornhill for some 190 years. People who've lived through world wars and other pandemics. Not just the Spanish flu in 1918, but I remember SARS hitting us in Thornhill in 2002. I was quarantined twice. I remember how people were so generous and gracious and compassionate as we faced those times together. Thornhill has lived through times of prosperity and growth and times of struggle. And the parish has followed the voice of the Good Shepherd, knowing that that is where we will find abundant life, not just defined by wealth, but defined by community, defined by how we care for one another and how we show others we care for them. And so as we go into the next, well, 10 years up to your 200th anniversary and hopefully long beyond that, it is to remember that it is that voice of Jesus Christ that is the one that continues to call us and asks us afresh, what will it mean to love neighbor as self, to look for the lost, to continue to seek and to follow and to serve. And then we will find, as the psalmist said, a table furnished for all we need, a cup running over. We will find that goodness and mercy shall follow us, and we know we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to
Amen.
God. Amen.